Ladies and gentlemen, what a moment in history. What a thunderclap on this Independence Day. The world has woken up to a startling headline. India has become the world's third largest economic power. Yes, a democratic nation of 1.4 billion people has surged past barriers, broken ceilings, and rewritten the script of global power. For decades, the world order was scripted in Washington and Beijing, with America and China competing for the crown of supremacy. But today, India has entered the ring not as a spectator, but as a decisive force. And make no mistake, this is more than numbers. This is more than GDP charts. This is about a nation that was once dismissed as a land of poverty, now standing tall as a land of possibility. Think of it: the software engineers in Bengaluru, the entrepreneurs in Mumbai, the farmers in Punjab, the scientists in ISRO. They are not just building businesses, they are building a new global reality. India's rise is not a miracle. It is the product of resilience, of democracy in action, of a billion aspirations that refuse to be silenced. And to Washington, to Beijing, this is indeed a shock, because the balance of power no longer tilts only across the Pacific. It now tilts from the Indian Ocean, across the subcontinent, into the very architecture of the global economy. But here's the question, ladies and gentlemen, what does India do with this power? Will it wield it with wisdom, forging peace, opportunity, and innovation? Or will it become entangled in the rivalries that have already consumed the giants before it? Tonight, as fireworks mark freedom across the skies of India, the world must understand a new chapter has begun. A chapter where the voice of India is no longer background noise. It is the headline, the story, the shock that shapes tomorrow. India's rise to the position of the world's third largest economic power is not merely a statistical triumph. It is the unfolding of a historic transformation that tells the story of resilience, innovation, and the sheer determination of over 1 billion people. Numbers can be cold and lifeless, but in this case, the numbers breathe life into the idea of what India has become. When we talk about GDP growth, we are not just talking about abstract percentages on a report. We are talking about the aspirations of young graduates in small towns, the hustle of entrepreneurs in crowded cities, and the ambition of scientists and engineers who dared to dream beyond the limits set by history. India's transformation into an economic powerhouse is a testament to the belief that democracy, even with all its challenges, can deliver growth, stability, and opportunity on a scale that no one thought possible. The path to this milestone was never smooth. For decades, India carried the heavy legacy of colonial exploitation, poverty, and slow development. The world often dismissed it as a country too complex, too chaotic, too fragmented to ever rise to global prominence. Yet, it is precisely this complexity that has become India's greatest strength. The coexistence of countless languages, faiths, and cultures under a single democratic framework has fueled an environment of creativity and adaptability. When Indian engineers built world-class IT services from scratch, when Indian farmers adopted new technologies to feed a growing population, when Indian businesses expanded beyond their borders to compete globally, each act was a step away from the old stereotype and a step closer to today's reality. India's economic rise is also powered by its demographic energy. The nation has the youngest workforce in the world, and that vitality has been channeled into industries that shape the future: technology, space exploration, renewable energy, pharmaceuticals, and digital innovation. This youthful dynamism is not only serving India, but also shaping global supply chains, influencing international markets, and redefining where the world looks for solutions. In this transformation, India has gone from being seen as a market for others to exploit to being a partner, a competitor, and in many cases a leader. What makes this moment extraordinary is that India's ascent is not built on coercion or control, but on openness, debate, and democratic participation. It represents a different model of success, one that proves a developing nation can rise without abandoning its identity. One that demonstrates that economic might can grow from diversity, and one that reminds the world that power is not only measured in wealth, but in the capacity of a people to rewrite their destiny against all odds. India's emergence as the world's third largest economic power is not simply a climb on the global GDP ladder. It is the culmination of decades of transformation, perseverance, and vision. The significance of this moment cannot be captured by figures alone, because behind every digit lies the collective story of 1 billion people who refused to accept the limitations history imposed upon them. This milestone is not just about the economy, it is about identity, confidence, and the reshaping of how the world perceives India and how India perceives itself. For much of the 20th century, the country was spoken of as a land of unfulfilled potential, a place whose size and population promised much but delivered little on the world stage. That narrative has now been rewritten. Today, India is no longer the subject of condescending curiosity, but a central player in the economic and geopolitical theater. The transformation has been rooted in the unleashing of talent and ambition across multiple generations. The IT revolution of the 1990s turned cities like Bengaluru and Hyderabad into global hubs, attracting international companies while also creating homegrown giants. This was not an isolated phenomenon, but the beginning of a larger movement where India became a place where ideas could thrive and industries could expand. Agriculture modernized, manufacturing gained momentum, services exploded, and innovation began to define India's global identity. Every milestone achieved by Indian scientists launching rockets into space or by entrepreneurs building billion-dollar start-ups reinforced the belief that the nation was not merely catching up, but carving its own path to leadership. Another engine of this rise is the demographic advantage. India's young workforce has become its most valuable resource, injecting energy into every sector. Unlike many developed nations burdened by aging populations, India's youthful dynamism has created a cycle of consumption and production that propels growth. This is not just about employment statistics. It is about millions of individuals striving for better lives, pushing boundaries, and in the process fueling a national transformation. Their energy has made India not only a participant in the global economy, but also a trendsetter in areas like digital payments, pharmaceutical manufacturing, and renewable energy. India's rise to the third position also reflects the resilience of its democratic system. It has managed to achieve growth while maintaining openness, debate, and diversity. This is not a story of power gained through suppression, but through participation, not through uniformity, but through diversity. The cacophony of voices, far from being a weakness, has produced a vibrancy that fuels progress. In becoming the third largest economy, India has proven that its strength lies not only in its scale, but in its spirit, not only in numbers, but in the aspirations that turn those numbers into a reality. For decades, the world order has been framed around two poles, Washington and Beijing, each seeking to assert its dominance, each attempting to shape the future in its own image. The rivalry between the United States and China has defined not only trade, technology, and security, but also the very architecture of global power. Yet today, with India rising as the world's third largest economic force, this once binary competition has been disrupted. The balance of power no longer flows exclusively across the Pacific. It now arcs across the Indian Ocean, tilting towards South Asia, where a new player has entered the arena not as a junior partner but as a decisive influence. India's arrival on this stage is not just about size, but about the symbolism of a democracy of 1.4 billion people forcing a recalibration of global politics and economics. This development is a shock to both Washington and Beijing because it alters their calculations. For the United States, long accustomed to assuming that global leadership was uncontested, India's ascent is both an opportunity and a challenge. On one hand, India is seen as a natural ally in maintaining a free and open global order, a counterweight to China's assertive rise. On the other, India's independent streak, its insistence on pursuing its own path rather than aligning blindly with any camp, introduces unpredictability. For China, the challenge is even sharper. Beijing has often portrayed itself as the inevitable successor to American hegemony, but India's surge undermines that narrative. The presence of a democratic Asian giant standing shoulder to shoulder in economic power makes China's dominance less certain and its influence less absolute. India's rise also changes the psychology of global perception. It signals to the rest of the world that the 21st century is not destined to be a simple tug of war between two powers, but a multipolar era where emerging nations can shape their own destiny. This reshaping of the order is not just about diplomacy or alliances. It is also about markets, trade routes, investment flows, and cultural influence. India's economic strength means that decisions made in New Delhi reverberate in Washington boardrooms and Beijing's corridors of power. Its growth redefines the geography of opportunity, placing South Asia at the very heart of global strategy. In this shifting landscape, India's role is no longer that of an observer or a balancing act, but that of an architect helping to draft the blueprint of a new world order. The shock to the established giants lies not only in India's numbers, but in the reality that their duopoly has been broken and a new voice now commands attention at the table where the future of the world is negotiated. The story of India's rise is not a miracle born overnight, but the cumulative effort of millions whose work has transformed the country into a force that can no longer be overlooked. From the buzzing streets of Bengaluru, where software engineers power the engines of global technology, to the factories of Pune and Chennai, where automobiles and machines are built for international markets, from the innovation labs of ISRO, where rockets are launched into space with precision, to the fields of Punjab, where farmers feed not only India, but the world. Every corner of the nation contributes to this larger narrative. These achievements are not disconnected events, but part of a mosaic that demonstrates how deeply rooted India's growth is in the lives of ordinary people. It is not about a select few reaping the rewards of prosperity. It is about the collective determination of an entire population that refused to remain confined to the margins of history. What makes this transformation so striking is that it has been built brick by brick, often against heavy odds. Infrastructure that once lagged behind has been modernized, supply chains that were once fractured have been integrated, and industries that once struggled for recognition have become globally competitive. Entrepreneurs who began with little capital have created companies that now rival international giants, while scientists who once faced resource shortages have launched some of the most cost-effective space missions in the world. In each case, the underlying story is one of resilience, the ability to transform constraints into opportunities and challenges into platforms for growth. India's transformation is also powered by a spirit of inclusivity and diversity that fuels creativity. The coexistence of multiple cultures, languages, and traditions does not divide the nation, but enriches it, creating an environment where innovation flourishes from many different directions. The software engineer in a tech hub, the artisan in a small village, and the startup founder in a metropolitan city all contribute to the same vision of a rising India, each adding a unique voice to the chorus of progress. This democratic distribution of growth ensures that the story is not controlled by a few elites, but is owned by the people themselves. When seen together, the achievements of India's citizens form more than just an economic rise. They represent a cultural and social renaissance. The pride of a nation is being rebuilt not through borrowed models, but through its own ingenuity and willpower. In this lies the true force of India's ascent, not merely numbers on a chart, but human stories woven together to create a new global reality. India's journey to becoming the world's third largest economic power has never been straightforward or without resistance. For decades after independence, the nation carried the scars of colonial exploitation, slow industrial growth, and the burden of poverty that seemed too overwhelming to overcome. Many around the world dismissed India as a country destined to remain trapped by its own complexity, too vast and too divided to ever achieve sustained progress. Yet it is precisely this complexity that has become its greatest source of strength. The ability to unite different languages, religions, and cultures within a single democratic framework has allowed India to cultivate resilience, adaptability, and innovation on a scale few other nations can match. The so-called chaos of democracy, with all its noisy debates and clashing interests, has not held the nation back, but instead provided the foundation on which long-term growth could be built. Each stride forward was the result of determination in the face of skepticism. When Indian scientists began dreaming of space exploration with limited resources, the world laughed. Today, India is among the handful of nations capable of sending missions to the Moon and Mars. When Indian entrepreneurs ventured into the global IT industry in the 1990s, many doubted they could compete with established Western firms. Today, Indian technology companies are not only competing, but leading in innovation and digital services. Farmers, once seen as trapped in age-old traditions, adopted modern techniques and helped transform India from a food-deficient nation into a major agricultural exporter. In every field, what outsiders saw as limitations became the very sparks that ignited transformation. This ability to transform struggle into strength is deeply rooted in India's democratic and cultural identity. Unlike other rising powers that have often relied on central control or coercion, India has shown that progress can emerge from openness, dissent, and diversity. Every election, every protest, every debate in Parliament may appear messy, but they reflect the will of a people who are deeply invested in shaping their own future. Far from slowing growth, this democratic participation has ensured that progress is not built on fragile ground, but on the sturdy foundation of collective ownership. India's rise to economic power is therefore more than just the story of development policies or market reforms. It is the story of resilience against doubt, of transformation against adversity, and of a nation that has proven wrong those who once believed its diversity would be its downfall. What the world now sees is a country that has turned its most daunting challenges into the very engine of its strength, carving out a place for itself on the global stage through conviction and courage. India's rise to economic power has been fueled not only by policy and reform, but also by the extraordinary energy of its people, particularly its youth. With one of the youngest populations in the world, India holds within its borders a demographic advantage unmatched by many developed nations grappling with aging societies. This youth bulge is more than a statistic. It is the beating heart of India's economic surge, a force that has driven industries, shaped new markets, and redefined how the world sees emerging economies. Millions of young men and women have entered the workforce with aspirations that stretch beyond survival and toward innovation and entrepreneurship and leadership on the global stage. Their hunger for opportunity and their willingness to challenge outdated systems have given India the momentum to transform itself from a struggling, developing nation into a vibrant hub of creativity and growth. This youthful dynamism has been most visible in the rise of new industries and technologies. From digital payments and e-commerce to renewable energy and biotechnology, young innovators have propelled India to the forefront of global conversations about the future. The widespread adoption of smartphones, affordable internet, and fintech solutions has not only empowered consumers, but also placed India among the pioneers of a new digital economy. Young entrepreneurs in cities like Bengaluru, Delhi, and Hyderabad have created start-ups that compete on an international level, often leapfrogging traditional barriers and setting trends that developed economies later follow. What makes this particularly striking is that these successes emerge not from inherited wealth or privilege, but from ambition, resourcefulness, and a determination to create impact. Equally important is the way India's youth are shaping global labor and knowledge markets. With English proficiency, technical skills, and adaptability, young professionals from India are contributing to industries across the world while also strengthening the domestic economy. This dual presence at home and abroad amplifies India's influence and spreads its intellectual and cultural footprint. Meanwhile, sectors like pharmaceuticals, information technology, and space exploration continue to benefit from the energy and commitment of young minds that are willing to take risks, learn quickly, and push boundaries. The rise of India's youth is not just about economics, it is also about confidence. A generation that grew up with globalization and digital access does not see itself as inferior or secondary to the West or China. Instead, it carries a sense of agency, a belief that India can lead rather than follow, shape rather than imitate. This shift in attitude is as crucial as economic statistics because it marks the true transformation of a nation. When its people, especially its young, begin to believe that the future is theirs to build and theirs to command, India's rise to the position of the world's third largest economy carries a meaning far deeper than GDP figures or trade statistics. It reflects the power of a democratic system that has managed to deliver growth while upholding openness and diversity. Unlike many other nations that have attempted to climb the global ladder through centralized control or authoritarian models, India has demonstrated that progress can emerge from debate, disagreement, and dissent. Its democracy, often messy and noisy, has proven to be a strength rather than a weakness because it ensures that development is not dictated from above alone, but shaped through participation from below. The existence of free elections, an active civil society, and a vibrant media has kept accountability alive, compelling governments to focus on policies that respond to the aspirations of ordinary citizens. This has created an environment where growth is not fragile but deeply rooted in the confidence and involvement of the people themselves. The democratic process has also allowed India to pursue a development path that reflects its own identity rather than imitating foreign models. Policies that have encouraged entrepreneurship, digital innovation, and rural development have come not from rigid uniformity, but from continuous negotiation between competing interests. This openness has helped create resilience in the system because when policies falter, they are corrected through public pressure and electoral accountability. It is a cycle that ensures progress continues even through setbacks, and that reforms, though sometimes slow, are anchored in popular legitimacy. Equally significant is how democracy has amplified India's diversity as a source of strength. With more than 20 major languages and multiple faiths and cultures, India could have been paralyzed by division. Instead, its democratic framework has allowed these differences to coexist and contribute to national growth. Regional aspirations are expressed through elections, minority rights are protected through institutions, and cultural plurality finds space within the national story. This has created a society where innovation does not flow from one single model, but from many directions, enriched by varied perspectives and experiences. The IT revolution, agricultural modernization, advances in pharmaceuticals, and creative industries all reflect the way diversity has nurtured creativity and adaptability. India's economic rise, therefore, embodies a unique model, one where power is not extracted from the people but built with them, one where diversity is not suppressed but celebrated, and one where progress does not silence voices but thrives on them. In an era where the world often doubts whether democracy can deliver development, India stands as proof that freedom and growth can march forward together, and that prosperity born of participation is not only sustainable but transformative.